Ontario's NDP leader, Andrea Horwath, capped off last week by denouncing not so much the budget itself, but the government that birthed it. Joining us now for more on why Ontarians will head to the polls on June 12th, there's Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario New Democratic Party and the former member for Hamilton Centre, nominated a couple of days ago to be the member again, you hope. And we welcome you here to TVO.
Thanks, Steve. I like that. Birthed it. I have never heard a budget be birthed before. I like that.
You know, it felt like
it's a very woman-friendly.
I was going to say, as we are on this program. One of the things we always like to find out on this program is how decisions are made in politics. So I want to start there and figure out how it was that your caucus decided that it was going to vote against the budget and pull the plug on the government. At what point did you make that decision?
Well, we had been talking about how things were going in Ontario for a number of weeks leading up to the budget. We had been getting these hints, these leaks about what possibly might be in the budget. We came back from a constituency week, always touching base with the caucus to find out where people were at, what sense did people get as they traveled around the province from Ontarians. And then on budget day, I went into the lockup and got a sense of what was in the budget. And then we had the budget read, of course, at 4 o'clock. We went back and spent most of that evening, well into the evening, probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night, poring over details of the budget as well as what we had heard from the caucus members. This would be myself and my team.
So you were still open at that point?
Well, we were seriously considering, you know, what the various likelihoods were. And at the end of the evening, I told my team, you know, I'm really thinking this is not going to be something that we can support. There's just too much in there. I mean, they threw in everything but the kitchen sink. And it just seemed like it was a desperate attempt to kind of change channels from scandal and waste and go on to this long list of promises that I had really no confidence that they were going to be able to fulfill.
So you decided? The
next morning I met with the caucus team again in Queen's Park, and we had a final discussion, and I said, this is where I'm sitting, and everybody was supportive. That was the right thing to do, and we went forward.
A unanimous decision of caucus?
Absolutely.
I know everybody says that, but it was unanimous?
It was an absolutely unanimous decision of caucus.
In previous years, you had always said, after the budget came out, I want a little time, which you're entitled to take under the rules, to consult with Ontarians and get a sense of where they're at. Mm-hmm. You didn't do that this time. Mm-hmm. How come?
We had been spending that time probably since the legislature broke for the holidays over Christmas, all through January and into mid-February, having some of those discussions with Ontarians. We had a number of different ways that we reached out, and I could tell that people were really changing from the year before. The sense that they were so disappointed. It wasn't even angry anymore. I mean, the year before people were angry, but at this point people were telling us they're disappointed, they're fed up, they just want to change.
People
they wanted
told
to
you
see
pull
change.
the plug on these guys?
We heard lots of that, and so we had to balance that obviously against a budget that had some interesting things in it, but really was just I think a move that didn't make sense. I mean, for me, it didn't make sense to support a budget with all these promises when the promises from the previous year hadn't been fulfilled.
Well, let me get to that in a second,
okay.
Because obviously you've heard this question before. How can the NDP vote against a budget that's got tax increases on higher income earners? How can the NDP vote against a budget that's going to enhance retirement and income security? How can the NDP vote against a budget that's got the beginnings of a plan to pay for transit and more money for personal support workers and early childhood education? How can the NDP vote against that budget?
Yeah.
So the answer is?
Well, the answer is I have no faith that this government is going to be able to implement these ideas. I mean, we've seen them not follow through on a number of promises already.
Like what?
Auto insurance rates are still up in the province of Ontario.
They say down 6%.
Well, you know, the people I talked to, I mean, I was in Brampton today for most of the day, and I can tell you nobody there has seen any change to their auto insurance rates. And in fact, people are saying their rates are going up. So there might be one or two few auto insurance companies who are passing on savings, but certainly the broad trend that I can see is that that's not happening. And we asked for them to get the rates down by 15%. They're nowhere near that, and I don't believe that they are actually serious about getting there. Having said that, the Financial Accountability Office was supposed to be up and running by December. It's not up and running.
They say that's your fault. They
Well,
say you
you know-
vetoed 2 of their choices to head up that office.
Well, I didn't, as a matter of fact. And the way, if the government was being honest with the people, the way that this thing works, these are independent officers of the legislature. It's not up to one political party, whether the government or not, to appoint the person. They have to be a person that has the trust of all 3 parties because they have a nonpartisan role, and they have to be completely unbiased.
There is the ghost of, right, that's always a part of this campaign. Kathleen Wynne won't say Dalton McGuinty's name. He is a ghost of Christmas past that continually is a presence in this campaign. Tim Hudak is going to hear over and over again that he's Mike Harris in short pants, and the specter of Mike Harris, the second coming of, is going to be there. And Andrea Horwath has to deal with Bob Rae, for goodness sakes, and that's 25 years ago already almost that he became Premier of Ontario. But that's still there with some people. How do you get past the ghost of? Because that's there.
Well, the difference being is that Tim Hudak was a member of Mike Harris's government and Kathleen Wynne was a member of Dalton McGuinty's government, whereas I think Andrea Horwath was probably still in high school, maybe when I don't know
When Bob Rae was premier.
Bob Rae was premier. So.
No, she wasn't in high school. She was in her mid-20s, but I get your point.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's something, it's always going to happen, and it's always, how you get to the other parties. But I mean, I think there's some legitimate things. When you see a lot of Tim Hudak's policies right now are very similar. Some of the things he's saying he's going to do are very similar to the things that Mike Harris did. So I think it's completely legitimate to draw that comparison there.
Chris?
I think maybe you get past it by having a strong voice and a strong sense of why you want the job. And I mean, Kathleen Wynne has been reminding me of Paul Martin a bit in the sense that it was like I got this thing and I'm now taking over from the previous leader, and why did I want to be here anyway? I haven't felt like I agree that she has a very strong personality that feels different. So I get a sense of who she is, and I get a sense that she's a different person than Dalton McGuinty, but I don't get a sense of her agenda. I don't get a sense of why she wanted the job and what she wants to implement. And
You don't have a sense of that yet?
No,
After all of
because
the
it
announcements?
well, these announcements feel more like election campaign promises. They feel more like a lot of money being spent. It doesn't feel focused. It doesn't feel like a vision for the province.
Madly running off in all directions.
Yeah, it feels like trying to, I mean, no matter what she does, she's going to be asked about gas plants. So every answer is another $100 million for, I mean, I agree, there's a lot of hundreds of millions flying to companies that shouldn't be. So it's a lot of spending. It doesn't feel like a focused vision to me. It doesn't feel like, okay, I understand who you are in terms of what kind of premier you're going to be. And I think that would help get past the ghost a bit, because then I can draw a clear delineation.
How does Premier Wynne deal with her ghost?
I think it's hard, and it's something we talked about right from the day after he resigned. There was debate about how far you can distance yourself from him. And one of the problems, and I think it was in your column today, you used the term throwing under the bus. And I think that's part of the problem.
So
is
throwing
that's
under the campaign bus.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that
Just to be clear, you were urging her to throw Dalton McGuinty under the campaign
I wasn't
bus.
urging her to commit homicide, but I was simply saying that it would be expedient politically
Yeah.
to be able to throw him under the campaign
She's never
bus.
done that.
She hasn't, and I think that the rhetoric is part of the problem, right? When you say it's throwing somebody under the bus, you're putting the blame on her, and there's a value judgment there. It's like the new snitching, right? And I don't think any of us should use that term, because you don't get thrown under the bus. You play in traffic. You do it to yourself. She is not McGuinty, and I think she's doing a good job now. She said that on day one. I'm Kathleen Wynne. I'm running against Tim Hudak and Andrea Horwath. I don't disagree with Chris, however, in that. And I think it's not disingenuous. I think part of her issue is that she does want to be all things to all people, right? I don't think she's doing that because she doesn't think that that's right. I think it's not she's not doing it because it's polling like that. That really is her. She wants to try and fix everything, but I agree with you that doesn't read well as a campaign, right?
There are a lot of people watching this broadcast right now who think the 3 of you have wasted the last decade or 2 of your life. They don't like politicians. They don't believe in politics. They wonder whether or not the 3 of you actually, after your careers are over, can look back and say, I accomplished anything at all. So I want to know Tell me something that happened because you were in public life that might not have happened had you not been there to champion it. John Garrison.
Let me first of all say I ran for office in '72 when I was a young, struggling lawyer, and my landlord, who was a councillor then, said you should run for council. You'll never make it, but you'll give your law office a bit of a profile, etc. From the first moment that I knocked on a door, I enjoyed it, and there is absolutely nobody involved in politics that is there because they don't enjoy it. It's as simple as that. When it comes to accomplishments, well, I'll let other people speak for that, but one of the most interesting things that I was involved in is that it was through my Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing at the time that the Greenbelt was put together. And it was by far the most fascinating public policy position or project that I've been involved in. The whole process, and as Dalton once told me, he said, John, 50 years from now, nobody will remember anything about what this government did, except in very broad strokes, but everybody will remember that we saved 1.4 million acres of land for protecting good agricultural land and environmentally sensitive land. And then, of course, there are local projects as well. I mean, the best politicians are the people that remember that they come from a local constituency, and you better represent that constituency to the best of your ability. I've seen cabinet ministers, that well-meaning cabinet ministers, that sort of neglected their local community, and the next election they were booted out. We just had a groundbreaking ceremony here for a hospital in Kingston here, Providence Care, which is going to be a state-of-the-art, brand new hospital for people with mental health issues and complex continuing care issues. I've been fighting for that literally for 16 years. And to see the groundbreaking take place, yeah, it's a bit of an accomplishment, but no, I don't think I've wasted my time at all. Are there some things that I would have liked to have seen differently, or are there frustrations with the job? Absolutely.
Like what?
Well, whenever you get a whole group of people together, we may have different opinions on things, but at the end of the day, you go in with one policy direction in a particular area. And, it always bothers me, and I see it going on in the campaigns right now, where everybody says, well, I'm consulting with Ontarians. What does that mean, I'm consulting with Ontarians? You take 100 Ontarians, and there may be 100 different viewpoints. Are you just consulting with the Ontarians that believe in what you're saying, or what the other people are saying? Like, there's these broad general statements made in politics that I think probably tick more people off than anything else. Tell people specifically what you have in mind as to what you're going to do. And if it's going to raise taxes, tell them that. If you're going to cut taxes, tell them that, but also tell them that if you're going to cut taxes, we're going to have to cut services as well. And I'm not trying to be partisan here. I'm a liberal, a centrist, middle of the road kind of a party, so I can see both the left and the right side of things, but like everybody tries to be everything to all people, and people are cynical about it, and they just don't believe it. And I think the best politicians are the people that are just straight up with their own constituency and tell them exactly what's happening.
Okay.
And I think the three of us, quite frankly, I know John quite well, and I know Donna very well too. I think we have always been that kind of a politician, and that's why I think we've been somewhat successful in our own ridings.
Donna Cansfield, something that you look back on during your 10 years there and you thought, yep, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't champion it.
It isn't so much the person, like one person who does it. So when you have something that happens in a ministry, it's the whole team that really makes it happen.
Absolutely.
So it isn't a minister that does it. So when, for example, I was Minister of Transportation when we put in the Highway of Heroes. Awesome, but it wasn't me. It was a whole group of people. It was Dalton, it was Cabinet,
it was the Premier's
everybody.
idea, wasn't it?
No, it actually came from a fellow,
Constituent,
a reporter. And he called and we took it there and off we went. But it was the same with the Greenbelt, like the Far North Act. That took so many people, the Endangered Species Act. One seatbelt, one person, those kinds. But the important part is that it isn't about the individual, it's about the team. And if you actually go into a cabinet position thinking you're a little bit better than anybody else, you're doomed to fail, because you're not.
And Donna, you and I know that some of them did think that way.
Yes.
Okay. All right, name
No
names.
name.
I want to know who.
No.
No
You'll have to
names.
wait for the book on that one, Steve.
Okay, we'll wait for the
But
book.
I want to share what John said. All the things that people need is they need someone who's honest and keeps their integrity intact. Because at the end of the day, I always say it's your head you put on the pillow. You're the person you have to live with. And if you can't live with yourself because you've been so dishonest, you don't belong here find another job because too many people count on you. And for me, it's been the constituency like John. Being able to help someone muddle through that or navigate through the nonsense and the bureaucracy of silos and ministries and helping to break it down and find some resolution has been the best, and it's the thing I will miss the most.
John, how about you?
Well, I guess when being in government, I was fortunate to be involved at a very high level with Jim Flaherty and with Elizabeth Whitmer and Tony Clement. And I guess being in opposition, I've seen one of the ideas that I had become law, and that was a father and his daughter were both killed, and there was a cell phone involved in it. And I went to the inquest, and so I introduced a bill that would ban the use of handheld cell phones, and eventually it was your government that actually proclaimed it. But the minister, in fairness, gave me credit.
In automobiles, obviously.
In automobiles, yeah. Driving while using handheld devices. So there's one where it took 10 years to actually get through the system and the stakeholders involved. I think that's fairly important. But I think, as both John and Don have said, being a constituency person, at the end of the day, that's where I represented as a municipal person, and provincially I represented very much in the same way. But the one difference is, Donna said it earlier, I used to go and talk to the minister before I'd ask a question, even before I'd put the question on the table in caucus. I would see if they could solve the issue. And I've actually had quite good success on a number of things with the different ministries for my constituents. Not a favor, but get them to review the case or to look at whether omissions made or in the review process.
So am I understanding this right? You would rather solve a problem quietly before question period than show a minister up at question period?
That'd be the last choice. The last choice is to poke them in the eye.
I think that most members would prefer to do it that way. If they can get a resolution to something, it's much better to do it away from question period than during question period.
Why do we have the opposite impression then?
Well, because question period is very adversarial, and it's, like you say, it's not answer period. And I'd like to say it is more, it's where we get to earn, the opposition get to earn some attention in media by being controversial and provocative. I don't particularly...
It's theater.
No, it's true, it's theater. It's very much so.
The hate we sort of see during, and I'll call it hate because sometimes it looks that way, the hate we see during question period is theater.
Yeah.
You guys don't really hate each other.
No, but there's no question that there is animosity. I think we would be misleading if we didn't say that. And there is no question that there are some folks who do not have a good relationship. But then there are many of us who do, who recognize that we're all there for the same reason.
But your critics gave you a heads up beforehand?
Always.
The best committee right now was in public accounts. They're the committee that are reviewing Orange Air Ambulance. But the Liberal critic, Helena Jasic, has worked marvelously with France Gélinas from the NDP, as well as with Frank Cleese, who was the lead on that file for us. I've never, in my many years there, have seen, and they are not being provocative, they're actually trying to solve and did a decent report out. I'd say probably the best work I've seen was done in the Public Accounts Committee, and look, I've served in all of them.
If I could say something there, I chaired the Public Accounts Committee during my last 4 years in opposition, and out of the 26 reports that we did, 24 of them were unanimous reports of all the members on the committee. And the reason for that is, if there's a program not being carried out the right way, it's to everyone's advantage that changes are made. And that's as much to the government's advantage, government members' advantage as is to the opposition members' advantage.
You've got some lovely, colorful charts here.
Indeed.
Hot off the presses. And let's start, if we could, Greg, with page 6, because when we want to consider who sort of has the wind in their sails, admittedly, at the early going, this tells the story.
Sure. In fact, this one is really more of an anchor than anything else. So when news comes, news goes. Sometimes it's good for you, sometimes it's bad. But where do people start? When they wake up in the morning before they see anything. And what that slide is showing is political brand loyalty. What party do people feel that they're closest to?
And the largest number feels like Liberals when they get up in the morning.
28%. And when you realize the battle between the Liberals and the Tories, there's only 21% of the province that wakes up and feels Tory. So the Liberals start on an average day 7 points ahead of the Tories.
And
they
lots
start
ahead of the NDP.
16 points ahead of the NDP. There's not that many people that identify with the NDP as a party.
Now, the rest of the numbers here suggest that there actually aren't that many people who get up in the morning and consider themselves free agents. Is that right?
Well, there's a certain 16% more than them feel they're New Democrat, don't feel that any of them work for them.
Okay.
And many of those people won't vote at all. And then there's another 11% that just don't know, and they're fairly disengaged, so they don't know that much. So when we have the situation we have in Canada today, where in a typical election, 50 to 60% show up to vote, the people that are most likely to vote are the people that feel close to an existing party, so that exaggerates the advantage that the Liberals have in terms of party ID.
Okay, let me take you to page 16 here, and for those who believe it's time for a change, right? Government's got to go. What did you find?
Well, what we found overall is that if you agree strongly, if you're passionate about it, then 55% are voting Tory, only 21% NDP. The story there is that people that are likely to be NDP supporters, so people that want to redistribute wealth, people that don't really trust the profit motive, people that say that spending should be based on need and not on ability to pay, those people are pretty happy with what Kathleen Wynne's been doing. And so they're not as likely to strongly believe that there's a need for change. And if there's no passion, there's no action.
Let's go to the page before, because we hear this all the time, that maybe it's time for a change, but I'm a little nervous about what Tim Hudak represents. What did you find there?
Right. And what we find is more than half of Ontarians today are nervous about Tim Hudak. They're afraid of what he might do if he wins. And the issue there is if you strongly believe that you're afraid of what Tim Hudak and the PCs might do if they're in power, then you're overwhelmingly likely to vote Liberal and not NDP. If you just back off from strongly agree to somewhat agree, the gap dramatically narrows between the NDP and the Liberals. But to the degree that the NDP takes shots at Hudak and actually get people scared about him, they're going to help the Liberals win. It's a real challenge for them.
E-health, Orange, gas plants, scrubbed hard drives with, erasing emails, all of this business. For some people, that has made them so infuriated they will never vote Liberal again. How many of those people are there out there?
Well, there's less than 40%. And those people, the ones that are most mad, they tend to be Tory. They tend to be conservative in their values, and they are spitting mad, which is very good for the Tories, because even though they don't have that big a pool to work with, their pool is really angry at the Liberals and isn't very likely to go there, and their values don't connect with the NDP. So they have what we call a GOTV, a get out the vote message, in the anger people have over these issues. But on the left is just nowhere near as angry about these issues as the right is. And I can't tell you why, they just aren't.
So for those who say the Ontario Liberals may have their problems, but they're still the best party to form government, is there enough of that out there for them to win?
Well, it's not as good as they'd like it to be. It's at 35% right now. They'd like it to be over 40. But the point there is that there are lots of people that don't think they deserve re-election who would not vote for them in a by-election, who when they think that the government's at stake, will hold their nose and vote for them, right? 10-second Liberals.
10-second Liberals. This one's always interesting because we've always been under the impression, we're talking about the leaders now, that Tim Hudak was the least popular leader. Kathleen Wynne was, reasonably well liked, but that Andrea Horwath was sort of the most popular leader by far. Your numbers tell a very different story. You want to take us through those?
Sure. Well, it's not that Hudak is well liked.
No, he's at minus 22.
Right. He's got almost double as many people that dislike him as like him in this online poll that we're talking about there. But for him, he's actually got more people that like him that are voting Tory. So he's not holding the Tories back. He's actually doing better than the Tory-based support.
He's running ahead of the party?
He is running. In terms of if you stop 100 people on the street, you will find more people that tell you that they like Hudak than say that they're going to vote for the Tories today.
Okay.
So if you take often what people will do is take the undecided out and compare what they call decided vote and decided views on the leader. But that's a bit misleading because that doesn't explain what happens when you stop people on the street. So he is not a barrier to them at this point in time. Now, there's going to be probably $2 million of working family ads that's going to be added to this.
Yes, we should just explain. That's the coalition of labor groups that certainly in the last campaign, dumped $2 million into destroying his reputation before the writs were even drawn up.
Right, and we've already seen an ad from them prior to this campaign going after Hudak. So he's going to have more pressure on him, but at the moment it's not a huge barrier. The really interesting thing, though, on leadership is Wynn's favorables and Horvath's favorables. And what we're seeing is more people like Wynn than like Horvath. It's just that in the past, fewer people have disliked Horvath, so she's had a stronger net positive image. She's picked up some negatives lately, very likely because of what she did on the budget. And if you look at who's best to serve as premier, if we look at that according to value groups, we see that the premier is doing much better than Horvath among a group we call core labor, which are people that say we should redistribute wealth, they don't trust a profit motive, and they see that spending should be based on need, not on ability to pay. They're almost 50% saying that Kathleen Wynne is the best premier.
Let me follow up on that, because I did a piece for our website not too long ago on, quote unquote, the two elections that Kathleen Wynne has to win. She has to establish herself as the champion of the center-left first, so kind of an election against the NDP, and then she's got to go out and beat the Conservatives to be the government. In that first election, that warm-up election, who's the champion of the center-left? Liberal or NDP doing? How's it going?
This week it's going to the Liberals, right? The left liked the budget, right? A majority of people on the left liked the budget. They were not happy, especially in the core left, with the decision of the opposition to force an election. They didn't want to see that. They wanted their pension. They wanted the pay increases to people on the front lines. But it's only the first week, right? And one of the things that I find interesting about the campaign is the decision of the Liberals to go for a longer writ than they really needed to do.
Meaning normally 30, 31, 32 days,
right?
This time 41.
Exactly. And that creates opportunity for things to happen you didn't plan for.
Like what?
Well, imagine that an envelope comes out about a contract that someone close to the premier got, or something comes out about some expense spending that she did.
Or the former premier's chief of staff gets arrested by the OPP.
Well, if that actually happened, it'd be pretty surprising. I mean, normally the police do not do moves like that in the middle of an election
Remember
campaign.
when the RCMP dropped the news that Ralph Goodale?
2006.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it does happen, but it's a rare thing. The real story is that the scandals that involve the former premier, some guy named McGuinty apparently, but you wouldn't hear that from the Liberals.
She said it yesterday.
Oh, did she?
She said it for the first time yesterday.
But the issues that deal with them are not sticking to her. And so what the NDP need to do right now is they need to find some things that will stick to her.
All in all, 28 government bills died last week when Ontario's minority parliament was dissolved. Gone, yes. But forgotten as well? Not tonight, not here. Joining us now for more, Andrew Reeves, a reporter with QP Briefing, and Katie Frenzios, who's the Queen's Park Bureau Chief at News Talk 1010 Radio. Good to have you two here for the first time.
Great to be here.
Great to be here. Katie, let's just start with the basics. We pointed out off the top, once the election is called and the House is dissolved, these bills are...
Dead, in short. That's all that happens. They were tabled, they were agonized over for 2.5 years, and now they're no more.
They don't just sort of sit over there waiting for the next House to come in and then they pick them up again?
No, when the next House comes in, depending on who is going to be the government, that's when they determine what MPP puts their private member's bill or government bill on the table. So we might see a few of these bills that died come back to life, but it's not guaranteed.
And Andrew, they're in various stages of repair, of course.
Yes.
Some of them passed first reading or second reading or third reading, whatever. Some of them have been debated by committees. All that committee work and investigation, what happens?
The interesting thing is that committees themselves actually cease to exist. You can go on the government's website now to look at what happened on previous committees, and it will not say anything because committees are going to exist essentially at the pleasure of the government that will set them up whenever a new government is formed. So anything that was debated up until any point in the committee process, can't find it. Does not exist anymore.
Does not exist. So all that work, all those submissions that people brought forward and deputations made?
Public consultations, hours and hours of public consultations, work that bureaucrats have done in the ministries, everything up until that point. Even if they want to introduce that bill and start again, they would have to start from scratch. Everything up to like things that members of the public have come in to say.
And this was, Katie, 194 bills. If you look from the last session, it's February of last year to right now. Not just the government, but the opposition parties as well, because they introduced their own private members' bills.
Yes.
And that's all gone as well.
It's all gone. Government bills, of course, they get a bit more fanfare because then you have the ministers out with the news conferences and the announcements and the wonderful graphic backgrounds that you always see on the news. But, you know, we see some small private members' bills as well from, like you said, the opposition, NDP, the Tories. Those are gone.
The minimum wage, we were told, was going to go up to $11 on June the 1st. Will that still happen?
Yes.
Now, why will that still happen? Because that was a bill that didn't get passed.
That's a regulatory change. So it's an important distinction. It's not particularly glamorous, but it is important to note. What happened with the minimum wage was they promised afterwards that they were going to introduce legislation that would essentially create reviews for it, that would tie future increases to the consumer price index. Inflation. And that was going to happen later on. And so that bill is one of the many that died. But the actual minimum wage increase to $11 will still take effect on June 1st because that was a minor non-legislative change that the government was able to make without having to go through the House.
So they just did that in cabinet, made this regulatory change, which is why we will have an $11 minimum wage on June 1st.
And it's also the same reason why we will have an increase in tobacco taxes, for example, which happened 6 days ago.
Okay, so that's interesting because I'm sure there are smokers, Katie, who would say, wait a second, you didn't debate this, you didn't pass this, how come the tax is going up?
And they're probably still very upset because the federal government included in its budget in February that they wanted tobacco tax to go up. So they're not necessarily getting the best plan here. But yeah, as Andrew was saying, there are a lot of regulatory changes that have been made or that will be made, but it's all the legislated ones that we won't see until a new government comes into play.
Okay, let's call this next part of our discussion here gone but not forgotten. I mean, they're dead. These bills are dead. But as you guys both point out, there was a lot of work that went into actually having them be introduced, etc. So let's see what happens now. Bill 143 on modernizing the child care industry. What's going on with that now?
Nothing. That was put in place because we heard about several deaths in illegal, non-licensed child care. So the health minister, the education minister said, well, you know what, we need to take a look at this. The proposal in that area was to increase fines. Fines were about $2,000, $2,500, and they were upping that to six figures. That's not going to happen.
Won't happen now. Okay, Bill 171, keeping Ontario's roads safe. Not happening, obviously, but what was that going to do?
It was going to increase a number of fines for drivers for distracted driving. It also had a number of provisions as well for cycling safety in the province as well, to be able to create a 1 meter passing rule. It was going to change, again, some minor issues to be able to make cycling on provincial highways, but also to create cycling infrastructure in urban areas to make that easier.
And of note, though, that bill, because it had all party support, it's probably going to come back. Now, if it's a Tory government, I don't know if we're going to see those cycling changes in there, but everybody seemed to be on board with distracted driving and trying to cut that down, because even as the transportation minister said, that the number of deaths and injuries out there, it's starting to look like DUI. So he said, if we can equate that to actually driving sober, people out there will understand, and maybe, along with a demerit point or two being lost, they can actually change their habit.
Bill 6, the Great Lakes Protection Act. What was that going to do until it died?
Well, this was actually the second time that this bill was introduced by the Environment Minister, Jim Bradley. He brought that up in 2012 when Dalton McGuinty was Premier, and it went nowhere when McGuinty prorogued in October of that year. So they brought it back again this time around. It was going to create a Great Lakes Guardian Fund in order to be able to help fund not necessarily big initiatives, but community-based projects. So things that people would be able to do for shoreline cleanup, habitat restoration, like wetlands protection. Small but significant things we're going to see funding through it. The Tories thought that this was essentially going to be creating more red tape, more bureaucracy. They thought there were a number of water quality protection acts already in place, and they didn't think it was necessary. Dragged it out in committee, it went nowhere.
Now it's dead. Bill 160, we should point out, I guess, it's called Bill 167, because it was the 167th bill to be introduced in that session, right?
Yes, they don't pick random numbers.
Nothing
for that.
more complicated than
no
that.
1001.
Right. Bill 167 was called the Invasive Species Act. What was it going to do?
Well, and we have the Natural Resources Ministry going out there and saying that, you know what, we're worried right now because a few years ago we had problems with ash borers and species invading the Great Lakes. We don't want that to happen again. So he was trying to put that in place so we wouldn't see species being invading Ontario. And David Orazietti was very, very upset, I believe, that this actually didn't go into play because he was pushing for it for so long and for so hard, even before he was Natural Resources Minister.
And this was years of bureaucrats who were working behind the scenes, meeting with stakeholders, doing the hours and hours of work that needs to go into any piece of legislation before it's introduced in the House. And the interesting thing about the Invasive Species Act as well was that it was intended to be able to do away with some of the overlap between municipal, provincial, and federal regulations, knowing that in some cases when an invasive species enters Ontario, like time is of the essence, and you don't have time to be able to deal with bureaucratic overlap, you need to act. And that was one of the key things that this bill was set to do until it expired.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety if you want to. They're on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, or on our iTunes channel, or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.